I almost didn't share this. For 3 years, I kept this poem hidden in my journal, turning to it only in my darkest moments. But last week, something happened that convinced me you need to hear it too. This isn't just words on a page. It's the exact framework that pulled me back from the edge when everything fell apart. Stay until the end, because the final realization changed everything for me, and it might just be what saves you too. Deeper truth. You know that feeling when life hits you so hard you can barely breathe? 3 years ago, that was me. I lost my business, my relationship ended, and my health collapsed, all within 6 weeks. I remember sitting on my kitchen floor at 3 a.m., wondering if this was it, if this was how my story ended. And that's when I stumbled across something that would completely transform how I navigate pain. Shi Heng Yi is a 34th generation Shaolin master who shared a poem so profound, yet so simple that most people completely miss its power. What makes this different is that it's not about positive thinking or manifestation or any of that surface level stuff we've all tried and abandoned. This is about something much deeper, a fundamental shift in how we relate to suffering itself. Before I share this poem with you, I need you to understand something crucial. Most of what we've been taught about handling difficult times is fundamentally backward. We've been told to fight negative emotions, to choose happiness, to distract ourselves until the storm passes. But what if that approach is exactly what keeps us trapped in suffering? What if the way out isn't through resistance, but through something entirely different? Ancient wisdom. Shi Heng Yi carries wisdom from a 1500-year tradition that views suffering not as something to escape, but as the very gateway to liberation. When I first encountered his teachings, I was skeptical. I'd tried everything: therapy, meditation, self-help books, even plant medicine ceremonies, searching for relief from my pain. But something about his words cut through all the noise. The poem I'm about to share with you isn't just beautiful language. It's a functional tool, a compass for the soul when you're lost in darkness. And here's what most people miss. Its power doesn't come from understanding it intellectually. Its power comes from embodying it, from letting it reshape how you move through your most broken moments. So I want you to listen not just with your mind, but with your entire being. Because these words aren't meant to be analyzed, they're meant to be lived. Revealed poem. Here's the poem. The storm does not ask permission to arrive. The lightning does not apologize for its brightness. The mountain does not explain why it stands tall. Nature simply is, and so are you. What you resist will persist. What you embrace will reveal its grace. The wound is where the light enters. The breaking is where the healing begins. Now I know what you might be thinking. That's it? Those simple lines are what changed your life? And that's exactly why most people miss the profound power contained in these words. We're so conditioned to seek complexity, to believe that transformative wisdom must be complicated or difficult to access. But the most life-altering truths are often the simplest. Let me walk you through why this poem contains the exact framework you need for navigating the hardest chapters of your life. First principle. The first principle hidden within these lines completely contradicts what most of us have been taught about dealing with difficult emotions. The storm does not ask permission to arrive. Think about that for a moment. When pain, grief, or fear wash over you, what's your instinctive response? For most of us, it's resistance. We think, this shouldn't be happening. I don't deserve this. I can't handle this. But the storm, whether literal or emotional, never asks if we're ready. It simply arrives. And our resistance to this fundamental truth is the very thing that amplifies our suffering. When we reject what is already happening, we create a secondary layer of pain on top of the original difficulty. What Shi Heng Yi is pointing to is radical acceptance, not as a passive surrender, but as the first step toward genuine power. Because you cannot transform what you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot heal what you won't allow yourself to feel. I remember the moment this first clicked for me. I was sitting in my empty apartment after my ex had moved out, surrounded by the echoing silence of absence. The pain was so intense, it felt physical. For weeks, I'd been fighting it, distracting myself, telling myself I should be handling it better. But that night, something shifted. I finally allowed myself to simply say, yes, this hurts. This storm is here. And in that moment of stopping the fight against reality, I felt something unexpected. Not happiness, not relief, but space. Space around the pain. space to breathe again, natural power. The next lines of the poem: the lightning does not apologize for its brightness, the mountain does not explain why it stands tall, point to something we've forgotten about our own nature. We spend so much energy justifying our feelings, explaining our pain, apologizing for our struggles. We've internalized the message that difficult emotions are somehow wrong or inappropriate. But look at nature. Does the ocean apologize for its depth? Does fire explain why it burns? Nature embodies its essence without hesitation or justification. And you are not separate from nature, you are nature. Your anger, your grief, your fear, these are not aberrations to be corrected. They are energies moving through the ecosystem of your being. They have intelligence. They carry messages. When we learn to listen to them rather than judge them, they become our greatest teachers. This was the part that unlocked something profound for me. I'd spent years feeling ashamed of my sensitivity, my emotional intensity. I thought it made me weak. But what if my depth of feeling wasn't a flaw, but a form of intelligence? What if I didn't need to apologize for how deeply I felt the world? Resistance paradox. Now we come to perhaps the most transformative line in the entire poem. What you resist will persist. What you embrace will reveal its grace. This isn't just beautiful language. It's a psychological truth that's been confirmed by research again and again. The paradox of healing is that moving toward our pain, not away from it, is what finally allows it to release its grip. Think about a time when you were upset and someone told you to calm down or just be positive. Did it help? Or did it make you feel even worse? Now not only upset, but also wrong for feeling upset. This is the trap we fall into with ourselves. We create an inner war, rejecting parts of our experience, and then wonder why we feel so fragmented and exhausted. The alternative that Shi Heng Yi offers is radical. It's about turning toward the very things we've been running from, not to indulge them or get lost in them, but to meet them with presence. I remember practicing this during my darkest period. Instead of trying to escape my loneliness or distract from my fear of starting over, I would set aside time each day to simply sit with these feelings. I would place a hand on my heart and say, "I see you. I'm here with you." It felt strange at first, even a bit silly. But over time, something remarkable happened. The feelings didn't disappear, but they changed. They softened. They began to move rather than remain stuck. Wounded light. The wound is where the light enters. The breaking is where the healing begins. These lines speak to a truth that every person who has undergone real transformation understands. Our deepest pain often becomes the doorway to our greatest growth. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, making the cracks the most beautiful part of the piece. This isn't just aesthetic. It's a philosophy that honors the history of the object, seeing breakage as part of its journey rather than something to hide. Your broken places, the failures, the losses, the disappointments, these aren't flaws to be hidden. They're the very places where wisdom takes root. They're where empathy is born. They're where your unique gift to the world begins to form. When my life fell apart 3 years ago, I couldn't see any purpose in the pain. It felt random, cruel, meaningless. But slowly, as I applied this wisdom from Shi Heng Yi, I began to notice subtle shifts. The very experiences that broke me open were creating space for new parts of myself to emerge. Parts that were more authentic, more compassionate, more alive. Practical application. So how do you actually apply this wisdom when you're in the middle of your own storm? Let me share the exact 3-step practice that I developed from this poem that you can use anytime you're facing difficulty. First, acknowledgement. When pain or fear or any difficult emotion arises, pause. Place a hand on your heart and simply name what's happening. Grief is here or fear is present. Don't analyze it or try to fix it. Just acknowledge its presence with the same matter-of-factness you would note the weather. Second, permission. Give yourself full permission to feel what you're feeling without judgment or timeline. You might say to yourself, "It's okay to feel this. This belongs in my human experience too." Remember, the storm doesn't ask permission to arrive, and you don't need permission to feel its effects. Third, compassionate curiosity. Once you've created this space of acceptance, gently turn toward the feeling with curiosity rather than fear. Ask it, "What are you trying to show me? What do you need?" Listen not with your analytical mind, but with your intuitive wisdom. I used this practice every single day during my rebuilding phase. Sometimes it would bring immediate relief, and other times it felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. But consistently, over time, it changed my relationship with difficulty itself. Pain was no longer the enemy, it became a messenger, sometimes even a guide. Societal conditioning. One of the biggest obstacles to embracing this approach is that we live in a society that's deeply uncomfortable with emotional authenticity. We're surrounded by messages that tell us happiness is the only acceptable state, that negative emotions are a form of failure, that we should get over our pain as quickly as possible. Social media amplifies this distortion, showing us carefully curated highlights that make others' lives seem effortlessly joyful. We end up feeling not just our original pain, but also shame about having that pain in the first place. Shi Heng Yi's wisdom cuts through all of that conditioned thinking. It reminds us that the full spectrum of human emotion is not just normal, it's necessary. It's how we process our experiences, how we learn, how we connect with others in an authentic way. When I began to understand this, I stopped hiding my struggles. I started speaking more honestly about what I was going through, and something remarkable happened. The more I honored my own truth, the more genuine connections I formed with others. People would tell me, "Thank you for saying that out loud. I thought I was the only one." Transformed perspective. The most profound shift that came from living this poem wasn't that difficult. Emotions disappeared from my life. They didn't. What changed was my relationship to them. I no longer saw pain as punishment or failure. I no longer believed that happiness was the only valid goal. Instead, I began to value wholeness, the capacity to remain present with whatever arose, pleasant or unpleasant. This shift transformed not just how I felt, but how I lived. Decisions that once paralyzed me with fear became clearer. Relationships deepened because I was bringing my authentic self, not a carefully managed version of me. Work became more meaningful because I was no longer running from discomfort. I could stay with the creative tension that produces our best contributions. 3 years after my complete collapse, I look back and see that those painful months weren't a detour from my life's path. They were the path itself. Every breakdown was making way for a breakthrough. Every loss was creating space for something more aligned with my true self.